Hello everybody, Mech here. Today we're going to do a very special project looking at Longino Garcia's 6mm designs for Battletech. So I was looking through, had the idea to kind of work on some more drop terrain for the battle mechs that I've been creating, and I was reminded of Hardware Studios and the models that were up here. So I grabbed the free ones. He has a set that are free up there. I printed those, and I even purchased the Mech repair bay option here, and 3D printed them. Now I have been in contact with the artist, and following the purchase he did share some additional designs for me to 3D print and test, so that's really cool. I appreciate that, and I love supporting other Battletech creators, so here we are. The prints came out nice and clean. There were some issues with printing some of them, but they were entirely my fault. So typically I print larger things at a bit of an angle. And for these two buildings you can see here in the video, the bottoms are clearly not quite even because I forgot to tilt them. So typically about a 15 to 20% tilt on buildings so that it's not doing a first layer print across the supports at a 90-degree angle, or else you end up with what you see on the screen here. So it took a little effort. I wasn't going to toss these away as failures because we can do something neat using green stuff and building up some rubble around the base of the building to make it lay flat on the board. So it's a quick kind of cheating fix to take something that would have otherwise been a print failure and make it work. Now assembling the mech gantries was pretty easy. Kind of the toughest part of these mech repair bays was sorting out the STL files because he hasn't broken up, which is a good thing because you can kind of mix and match what types of parts you want. However, the labeling is a little bit of an issue. So I actually have been in contact with the artist about possibly getting those files renamed. But once you sort it out, I actually went through the file and renamed them myself. And once you have them all renamed, it's easy to kind of pick the ones you want and piece it together. So some of the gantries have little grabber arms, some of them just have scaffolding to stand on, but there's enough difference there to make each one unique. And there's also 3 different sizes for the mech repair bays. You can see when you look at the files, but the big one is wide enough to take any of the battle mechs that I own, including really wide ones like the Stone Rhino. Once everything was assembled and the green stuff was cured overnight, I went in with the black primer. So again, pretty typical stuff for painting. Vallejo black primer works great. The buildings themselves have lots and lots of nooks and crannies, so that took a little bit of effort to get it all painted, but it did eventually work out. Next up for the buildings was a dry brush. So I use a big cheapo makeup brush for this. Kind of hits the raised portions to make it look like concrete and leaving the darker patches behind. After that, using the same light gray color from Model Color to paint the roof. So to avoid the look of a building that's just entirely black, I wanted to contrast because really you're typically going to be looking down at the top of the table when you're playing Battletech. So giving the roof, putting some considerable effort into the roof, make it look nice is important. So painting it that light gray and then hitting it with the Space Wolves contrast paint will give it some depth and character from a distance. Next up is using some bold titanium white. Now anytime I'm going to be painting a light color over black, I'm typically going to go to the Pro Acryl the titanium white, just because it's such an intense white. It does a really good job of being a new base coat on which we can put any color. In this case, I'm just going to leave a white and then go over it with a contrast paint here in a second. So using the Telesar blue from Citadel over the top to make these solar panels look like solar panels. And it's a nice bright color, again, contrasting with the dark colors for the rest of the building, makes it stand out and catches the eye, which is really cool. Plus, it's just really fun to use contrast paints. Alright, next up is the challenging part here. So using some Faded Ultramarine and the Army Painter Speed Paint Quick Medium to kind of make it a little bit more watery and kind of flow into those little nooks and crannies. Going in on each of the buildings and getting a bunch of what I interpreted as the open windows. You could look at it in any number of different ways. There's nothing that really kind of is an obvious window. But I kind of hit the flat areas, and some of them I left blank, and some of them I left open. After it dries, I went in with the Citadel Contrast Athromatic Blue and filled in the windows. So that will give it much more kind of a window effect at first glance. Again, it's not super highly detailed. I'm not putting in kind of what would be seem like I'm on maximum effort on a model, because again, this is drop terrain. Meant to look enough like a building to make it look cool, but I'm not going to spend 16 weeks meticulously painting each window. That would be painful. Alright, moving on to the other models. We've got the water tower and the mech repair bays and a couple of fuel tanks that I'm going to hit with the metal color airbrush paint, which is awesome. It covers quickly. It's one of my favorite paints to use through the airbrush. It is just perfect. The mech repair bays, again, primed black and then went over with the metal color, works great. In fact, if you were feeling exceptionally lazy, you could just go with this at this point. If you didn't want to go in and do all the details and make it look fancy, just prime it, cover it with that metal color and call it a day. The next step, I used a homemade Nuln oil mixture. It's a combination of various things, including a black ink, to get into all the little nooks and crannies. It darkens up the metal, makes it a little bit more nitty-gritty. Afterwards, it is significantly darker, so I come back with the Necron compound and do some dry brushing to catch the edges in order to build up that kind of 3D effect when you're looking at it. Next step, using some Abaddon Sunset to do some detail work. Pulling out those bars in the back so that workers will know that they're there and they will not fall off and hurt themselves. We don't want any mech techs having to deal with OSHA regulations or OSHA violations. That's all good. For the oil tanks, used just a few colors to pull out to make them kind of look fancy and special. The speed paint here to give the metal color a bit of a red tune works great. Flows into little nooks and crannies, good coverage. Kind of reinforces just how neat those speed paints can be. For the other set, did a little bit of yellow accent marks, and then for this middle section, you're going to come in again with the Pro Acro White as a base, and then I'm going to come back in with a speed paint here in a moment, and it'll help pull the rest of this little model together. These little oil tanks or fuel tanks are great because they're just the perfect height to give the mechs partial cover. When you're scattering them on the field. Good place for your mech to hide behind, though you may have to have a house rule about maybe rolling to see if the oil or fuel tanks are full, and if missed shots might have a chance to trigger an explosion. There might be a benefit to hiding behind the fuel tanks, or maybe a possible risk too if things don't go quite well for your dice rolling. So once it's dry, use the Fire Giant Orange from the speed paint to go over the white. And you're going to see pretty quickly, it does a really great job of pulling out that middle section, giving the fuel tanks a little bit of character. So beyond that, that's pretty much it for the buildings. I added a little bit of detail here and there, pulled out little signs using some accent colors. But other than that, these models are really great, and they're really fun to paint. And I think they'll be a nice addition to my table here when I play Battletech with friends and family and my two sons. So of course, the younger one will probably have more fun playing with the terrain than playing the actual game, but he's a good sport. If you're looking for drop terrain for your Battletech games, check out the website. I've got the link down below, and I appreciate the watch. Be awesome, take care, and make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.